Hello, English 302 students. Paulette Stevenson here with our first week's wrap up. I know we're not on week one anymore, but I wanted to wait to record this until after I read through your rough drafts. So, just a couple of housekeeping things. You'll notice a couple of things. The first two discussions are graded. I don't think I have any really crazy comments on there except for that you guys are all bringing up really interesting examples and discussing things in deep and interesting ways. So my advice is to just keep doing what you're doing. I think you're all taking really interesting points from our text and placing them into perspective. I would say that if you need to, like, I know I've talked to my other classes, is that this text, because it's not a textbook and it's a case study, some of you all that have aspirations to go into business, for example, into the private sector and not into government policy, or to go into business for yourself, you might think of ways that this text or some of the things that she's talks about, some of the communication principles and getting users involved in these are applicable to business, to private sector instances. So that's something to think about, especially if you're like, I don't know how this policy stuff relates to what I want to do. I think it does. That's why we're reading it. I think it has communication implications. And so thinking about that and thinking about how that translates, oftentimes as professional and technical communicators, that's one of our jobs, whether your job in the workplace is writing or not, or primarily writing or involves writing. Sometimes a lot of what you do is translating or kind of code switching in taking one sort of thing, right? If you're moving into departments, like if you work for HR, for example, you might be talking about a very legal policy like Title IX, but then you have to translate into how that would work in, say, for instance, a certain department. Like, for instance, our Title IX person can come and talk to us about the implications for relationships between faculty members, right? And they have to imagine and think of situations that aren't outlined in a pretty broad Title IX policy. And so that's the kind of work that sometimes we have to do as writers in the workplace, or as people who see our primary job as professional and technical communicators. So think about that as you go through the book. If you're if your focus is policy and you want to go into government work and the environment or the environment or nonprofit or any of that, by all means, like, get in the weeds about the kind of communication stuff that she's talking about. But I'm just offering a choose your own adventure for some of you that, in any case, are having a hard time figuring out how this text fits in with what you want to do. Take the theories, apply those to what you want to do or to what you're talking about. Like I said before, I didn't buy a textbook, or I didn't order a textbook for this class. Number one, because they're like $150 and, that's highway robbery. Number two, and I've asked this in a lot of my classes, if you need to learn how to write a memo formally, how would you figure that out? Like, you don't know. Would you go to a textbook? Most of you would probably say no. Many of you would probably say you'd Google it. And that's the the textbooks offer a little bit more than that, for sure. They're valuable, but they're not $150 per student valuable, is my point. So I've offered some of the rhetorical awareness through the lectures and some other resources and through the case study we have. So I want to talk a little bit more about the rough draft. I think a lot of you are really either on the right page or close to the right page. Some of you needed a little bit more nudging than others. I think the report format has messed some of you all up a little bit. So one of the things I've suggested to students is go back to the lecture. It's a pretty standard scientific report format. It's what the social sciences and hard sciences use in a lot of their journals, with an exception of some sections are a little bit different depending on conventions. Most of the thing that has tripped you all up is the difference between the methods, the results, and the discussion section. So real quick, a couple of really great examples from our rough drafts are ABUS, and apologies in the wrap-up video if I misgender you and mispronounce your name. Sometimes in the online class, if you don't upload pictures, and right now I'm not looking at Schoology, I'm looking at the Drive folder. I can't tell, and sometimes, anyway. Just send me an email and say, here's how I pronounce my name, Dr. Stevenson, and here are the pronouns I use. So ABUS had like a really great user experience report. And when I say really great, I don't mean that these are A+ and ABUS has zero work to do. I mean, he started out with all the right parts and could use some revisions for sure. Caden had a really great one on Twitter. I want to take a look, or I'm taking a look at that right now. He really, like the methods section here, most of you sound like you're doing observations. So your methods section is going to be like, this is what I looked at on the website. I looked at, like the organization of the page. I looked at, the way, like I looked at the number of comments on social media pages as well as interactions on social media pages, and you'll probably be a little bit more specific as to how you looked at it. Like, did you count how often PayPal interacts with users on Twitter, or how many times a day, or the substance of those comments? Like, did they just say, reach out via email, or did they actually troubleshoot those comments in the thing? So you're going to tell us some of that stuff in observations. And then you're also going to tell us why you think that gets at user experience for your website, and social platforms for your organization. Some organizations are going to need different tests, and I wanted to highlight Cadence because he's looking at really a really specific question. He's not looking at all of Twitter. He's looking at protecting users against bullying and hate. So instead of just going in and saying, okay, let me see if it does, he did usability tests. And so you can take a look at, he describes those in his methods, and he says, this is what I did. These are the questions I had. And we had you had an intro to that with that Starbucks, with the article about the Starbucks usability tests on, I think it was a Medium article. So it gives you kind of an outline of what a usability test does. So he performed usability tests, which not everyone's using, but a couple of you are, and that's how he kind of shows his methods. The results section is not a place where you tell us all the things wrong with the stuff or how great they did. You report your results. So it sounds really, in theory, it's much easier sounding to do on a usability test. So if all you did was perform usability tests, you're just reporting those results. Like 5 people could get to, the blocking stuff within 5 or 6 steps. The other 5 people couldn't get to it at all, right? So you're reporting that kind of stuff. With the people who are doing more content analysis and organization stuff, you're reporting on that. So when I looked at Southwest Twitter, I saw that they I looked at it for, in your methods section, you're going to tell us how long you looked at it over, right? You can't look at it forever, but you looked at Southwest Twitter for a week. So in your results, you're going to say, within the week that I looked at it, they interacted with, you could be quantitative and you can tell us how many users they interacted. You can be qualitative and tell us kind of the characteristic of the tweets they're responding to. So they're responding to like a lot of troubleshooting stuff, and they're actually, you could tell us how they're doing it on Twitter. You could tell us that they're just giving the 800 number. If there's anything that like really stand outs, maybe there's like a couple of really crazy case studies there. You can do that as well. So keep that in mind. You see my dog behind us over there. There we go. Sorry. So those are some things to think about. The results are reporting the results. You're like, hey, scientific community. For you, it's the bosses, the company that you're reporting to. You're like, here is my data. At this point, you can have charts, graphs, screenshots, etc. That's really great stuff for that section. In the discussion section, you get into the analysis. That's where you can bring in Michelle Simons and say, hey, look, like, here's one principle that's really great to follow on user stuff, is that we want users to be able to have a voice and participate fully. And here's what Michelle Simons says about that. And here's where I saw, like here's where, like, Southwest did really great. They were really receptive to people on Twitter. They answered them. They did all these things. And then you could say they fell short because, 50% of those comments were just call the 800 number. And then you could go into, like, in this internet technology age, there's a lot of reasons why responding directly on Twitter is better for users than trying to make someone call and sit on a 800 number, right? And so that's the discussion section where you get into the analysis. And then the conclusions are always pretty short. Like, here's where I think, like you can kind of preview maybe a couple different changes you'd see, but reserve spelling any of that out until the memo that you write, which is project number 2. So in conclusion, there's a couple of really great user experience reports that still need work. I don't think any of you, I'm like, start over and rewrite. I do think that a couple of you thought this was a little bit more of a company analysis as opposed to thinking about the user experience of their website and social media. Okay. So keep that in mind. Like I tell all of my students that are in these writing classes, what I'm expecting is not that you turn in a perfect 100% amazing product, especially on the rough draft. I'm expecting that you turn in a rough draft, you get some feedback, and then you revise, right? And you prioritize your revisions. Is that you're going to have not a billion comments, but you're going to have a hefty amount of comments on your rough drafts. I know I put probably 3 or 4 of them on there per person at least. And I was just trying to look at big picture stuff. And the majority of people, I really commented on the way that you have it structured, because that was one of the big things I saw was the structure. So you're going to deal with higher order stuff first, right? If somebody's like, hey, the period's in the wrong place. I mean, for sure, if and hopefully you get to an editing point, that's fine. That is not my major concern as you revise this. So if you run, for instance, let's say you run out of time, right? This is an accelerated time class. So you have between basically Wednesday night and Friday night to turn in a final draft, right? You need to address stuff. You can't possibly address all of it, but you should address the stuff, like the big stuff. If we all said your methods section needs work, right? Address that. That's a big thing. Or you need to rewrite it, or you don't have a methods section. That's a big thing. if we set, so that's my point is, I don't require you to do a revision plan, but it might be nice to sit down and jot down after, like, go through the rough draft tomorrow morning or tomorrow when you get a chance and take a look at the comments and put together a plan. Which comments are you definitely going to respond, like rate them? I'm definitely going to respond to these like 4 are priority 1, these 4 are priority 2, these 4 are priority 3, and so on. So rank them so that, as maybe you set a timer for yourself, like, this project I have 2 hours and I'm going to use 2 hours to revise it. You set a timer for those 2 hours and you get what you can get done in those 2 hours. Cool. So hopefully you all have a strategy. Nobody should be freaking out at this point. You all are on good track to succeed in this project. So very happy to do this. And yeah, I will probably mostly record these there because we have 4 rough drafts and our class is 7 weeks. I'll probably mostly record these as opposed to weekly. I'll probably mostly record these after I've read rough drafts to kind of give a more holistic look at how the class did and maybe give you guys examples of people who I thought did really stellar work. I don't think I'm going to call out people on this like this person did really poorly, but to give you guys a really guiding example here. So awesome. Really excited to see how these shape up. And yeah, I will see you again soon. Take care.